from Little Earth to the winds, from the city council resolutions to the people of Palestine taking back their country, our movements are winning. Our movements are winning, and the revolutionary working class is indeed on the move.
Welcome to Fight Back Radio, production of fightbacknews.org, taking you to the heart of the people's struggle. I'm your host, Richard Berg, and today again we have a guest that I think you'll enjoy. We have David Gilbert Pederson, or DGP, as his friends call him, who just gave a fabulous May Day presentation, which you'll hear part of, or you'll hear mostly all of it, on this episode. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about what's been going on the campuses here in the United States. Our last episode, we featured Adore Tamayo from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and we talked about repression on the campuses and what had happened at UWM. But little did we know that encampments would spring up everywhere, and too many to count right now, and they would be dealt with differently by different administrations, but largely with repression. The police have been called out on campuses across the United States, despite the fact that the students have received wide support. Their demands vary from campus to campus, but by and large, they have to do with divestment of stocks and other financial ties to companies in Israel, or companies that sell weapons to Israel. And they've exposed the United States government and their campuses, for that matter, too, to the ties that they have to the genocide that's currently going on in Palestine. And as a result of this, they've stood strong. They've been threatened with expulsion, arrest, and those things have happened in some cases. I got to say, I'm very proud of my niece Brianna, who was arrested with 70 others at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. But these students that are standing up are showing us the way, and they're exposing who's really running education, higher education in this country. It's, the rich people say, oh, well, let's have freedom of speech and discovery as long as we control the discovery and the speech. And when people start to call out, war crimes and genocide, they fight back pretty ferociously. They've used the pretext in some cases of having safety. But as far as I can see, the only unsafe things that have happened is the police have attacked these students who have been peacefully protesting. Also, I want to give a shout out to veteran activists like Angela Davis and Frank Chapman, who visited these encampments and talked about some of the things that are going on. As the school year comes to an end, I want to highlight also, though, that we're going to have protests this summer. At the two conventions, the Republican National Convention on July 15th in Milwaukee, and the Democratic National Convention on August 19th here in Chicago. And especially, both are important, but I think especially the one here in Chicago is going to focus on Palestine and the Biden administration's continual funding. I mean, as these bombs are dropping, as I'm speaking on Rafah, these are American planes, American bombs that were given to them by the United States. The United States has given like $3.5 to $4 billion in military aid every year for the last 25 years or so to Israel. And this year, it's bumped up to like around $9 billion. So as the genocide occurs, it's more costly. And so, we'll fund that. We, United States taxpayers who don't have enough money to put into our schools or whatever, we're going to fund that. And funding or not, genocide is repugnant. I heard the University of Chicago president, just before they called in the university police to clear the encampment there. He said, well, we don't take sides in this. What do you mean you don't take sides in a genocide? I didn't know that there was a side to be taken. You should be against genocide. That's all there is to it. And that goes for the president of the University of Chicago and all these other universities and corporations. And I salute the students who are calling them out on this sort of thing. Anyways, I had to give a little bit of a rant there, but I want to get back to our program today. David Gilbert Pederson, who is a member of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul in Minnesota. And this episode came about, actually, he gave a speech that went up online that was, quite moving about why he's a member of Freedom Road and, why it's important to be a socialist and a revolutionary, and how it ties into the day-to-day struggles, not just in the Twin Cities, although that's who he was speaking to, but nationally. So I thought, hey, let's call him in and put him on Fight Back Radio. And so we're going to have this speech, which is about 15 minutes, and we'll have that in the middle. But we're going to bookend it with a discussion with David and talking a little bit about some of the things that are going on right now. And I just want to say May Day is an important working class holiday. If you go back, I've said this in past episodes, but I want to go back and highlight episode 2, 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, I think, of Fight Back Radio, was an interview with Larry Spivak of the Illinois Labor History Society. And he talks about how May Day came about and the incidents here in Chicago and the fight for the 8-hour day and the Haymarket incident. So if you don't know that story, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that particular episode. But May Day has become the holiday across the globe where people stand together. And this May Day, workers are calling out U.S. imperialism in whatever country they're in, their imperialism for what they're doing in Palestine. But it's also the day that we call for labor union rights. We call against national oppression. All of these things. And there's been May Days that were held across the United States. And DGP's speech in Minneapolis, I think, is exemplary of what that is. So here's David Gilbert Pederson, DGP. So welcome to Fight Back Radio, DGP.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
It's good to have you here. For our listeners, this was kind of a spur of the moment thing when you gave a rousing speech on behalf of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization at the May Day or International Workers' Day event in the Twin Cities. And I heard that and I said, boy, we got to get this guy on here. And of course we've met and we know each other from other things, but I wanted to, we're going to play that clip of your speech, but in about the middle of our episode here. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit beforehand about what led to that and why you gave that rousing speech that you did. And so the first thing, this is a May Day speech. Why is May Day important to you, DGP?
So May Day is just an incredible proletarian holiday, and coming of age around people who had been involved in sort of peripherally involved in movements. I knew the importance of International Workers' Day. I think as a labor organizer for many years, Labor Day in our world held a specific place for me. When I met Shireen Horzat, the former president of AFSCME 3800 and a member of Freedom Road, she told a story about the first time she learned of May Day. And it's that it wasn't until she was doing national liberation work in El Salvador that the Salvadorans told her about May Day and about the history of the holiday and the unity and working class unity in the holiday. I think and from you, Richard, actually, another part of me wanting to join Freedom Road was going to Labor Notes, being on a couple of the tours around Chicago that you did. And so I think through my labor work, through the things I've picked up, and then from comrades and seeing pictures throughout the world of how the holiday is celebrated, from the Philippines to Syria, to Bolivia, to Europe, to Korea, everywhere. folks are rising up on that day and celebrating the contributions of the toiling class.
No, I think you're right. I mean, it's a day that it's one of my favorite. It probably is my favorite holiday because it's a day that we all feel powerful because you realize it's not just me by myself here fighting against this kind of oppression or dealing with the day-to-day stuff, but that there's people in my situation everywhere in the world, and we're all fighting together to make a better world. And so I agree with that. And so I want to talk a little bit about the speech that you gave. And at one point you go, and you did this as Freedom Road. So there's a certain themes to it that we'll get to. But you talk about, you gave a list of names, and this struck me because you talk about Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin and these really heavyweight people. But then you also talk about, you mentioned Shasta Jones, for example, who's, a comrade here in Chicago that just passed away. And could you talk a little bit about, how you chose who to mention in your list there and, what that meant or what you were trying to get across there?
Absolutely. I think as a great proletarian holiday, it is a time for us to reflect on working class people and on communists and socialists who helped shape the views that we work towards. And so I mentioned Karl Marx, Vladimir Lenin, Joseph Stalin, and Mao Zedong as real sort of heroes and foundational elements of our movement. And I also think it's important to remember other people who have passed. And I think, in particular, if you were involved with the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, if you ever spent time in Chicago doing work, you met Shasta, you knew her, you loved her, you struggled with her. And I think it is really important for us, both organizationally and as mass groups and as a movement, to celebrate the legacies of those people. I also mentioned some more. When I said the spirit of May Day was alive in the working class, I mentioned people like Ghassan Kanafani, Hugo Chavez, Claudia Jones, and Joma Saison. I think, I mentioned those four in particular. I didn't want just a laundry list of all of the people who have contributed to Marxist-Leninist thought. But I wanted to pick out people for whom movements that I have been involved with over the past and in movements that I've seen Freedom Road involved in, who were some of the thought leaders of those movements. And so I've done a lot of work recently, as all of us have, around mobilizing for Palestine. And that goes back to when I was holding marches as a middle schooler as well. And so I wanted to talk about Ghassan Kanafani and the importance of both the literature that he wrote as well as the work he did with the Popular Front. Wanted to talk about Hugo Chavez, both because I think the pink tide, or the rise of socialist and progressive regimes in Central and South America was very pivotal to my understanding of how to build power collectively. And so I think, and Hugo Chavez really was an incredible leader who brought together many strands of thought and created the Bolivarian, helped create the Bolivarian Revolution. I wanted to talk about Claudia Jones because Black liberation has been something that I have been involved with the struggle for many years. And then Joma Saison, the founder of the Communist Party of the Philippines, just because as a Filipino American, as somebody who grew up around people who fled the Philippines during martial law, I wanted to my thoughts around communism, around mass work, around a united front, around the mass line were really, really shaped by Philippine Society and Revolution, the groundbreaking book that Joma wrote, as well as some of his other writings, and watching the National Democratic Front of the Philippines and the the above ground organizations, mass organizations that they work with, as well as the defense front, the New People's Army, and the local defense mechanisms.
No, that's good. And you know, just to as you're talking, I was thinking. I mean, whether it's Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Russian Revolution in the early 20th century, or Shasta Jones, who ran the office here in Chicago, was the face of the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and was just a vibrant organizer. Both of them were, you hit on what the theme, I think, of your speech was, which is the importance of revolutionary organization. And why, for a May Day speech, why did, Freedom Road is a revolutionary organization, but why did you pick that as a theme for your speech, and why do you think that is so important?
I think that a big part of my sort of getting out of what was a really frustrating period of time in my life, because I felt like I had been doing all sorts of activism and like nothing was like, it's not that nothing was working, but like jumping from like cause to cause and victory to victory, or like victory to defeat, I think that when I made the decision to join Freedom Road and start to do more mass work with Freedom Road before I joined, I think I realized that these upsurges, I said this later in the speech, but these upsurges make and shape history. The George Floyd Rebellion, the resistance to the Iraq War, the resistance to the Vietnam War, Occupy Wall Street, all of these upsurges help raise the level of consciousness, raise the level of struggle. But we see those moments of escalation peter out, whether it's because of state repression, whether it's because another awful tragedy happens, whether it's because, the working class sort of white middle in America has decided they don't care about the thing anymore. And the only thing that can sustain those upsurges is organization and unity. And I think the refounding of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression was the point at which I realized I wanted to join Freedom Road. And I think the thing that sort of pushed me over the edge was that in May, after the killing of George Floyd, in part because of the refounding of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, all across the country, people were able to be mobilized because through the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression and through the work that Freedom Road members did, we were able to help spread that rebellion across the country and to have linkages that we could make because Freedom Road does the connective work of our movements. We were able to have a pretty unified message: an end to national oppression of Black people, end to police violence, community control of the police. And that gave people a rallying cry instead of just justice for George Floyd, which was a very immediate and serious demand for everyone, but that we knew that the killing of George Floyd has a basis not just in ideological racism, but in the material oppression of the Black nation. And it was through Freedom Road and the National Alliance that I was able to see how effectively a small group of militant, dedicated people who are organized and in a revolutionary organization with people are able to mobilize across the country.
Okay, so for you, the Black Liberation Movement and Freedom Road's connection to it was a game changer in saying, okay, we really need these kind of organizations. I want to flip a little bit here and ask you about the current high tide. I know George Floyd was from Minneapolis, but the current high tide is focusing mostly around Palestine. And could you talk a little bit about, the same thing, the same question? Why is revolutionary organization important in the battle for the justice for Palestine, and some of what's going on with the student encampments and the marches? And I know in your city, because I read Fight Back News, that there's a lot going on. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say that it is nothing short of breathtaking. The militancy, the organization, the dedication, and the fearlessness of these students. And that militancy and that organization and that defiance and that real deep desire for liberation is not, it doesn't sort of come out of nowhere. That spirit of resistance and that spirit of struggle comes from watching now 7 months of a genocide and watching the Palestinian people resist for that long, and knowing that this didn't start on October 7th, that the oppression of Palestinians has been going on for over 100 years, and that there always has been an armed resistance and a mass resistance to colonialism. So I just want to say that, like, that is what's driving all of this. But the students in particular have made, we saw incredible immediate response after October 7th. And, I think as Israel has escalated their genocide, as the Palestinian resistance and the regional resistance has escalated their level of struggle, I think in the US and in the countries, the imperialist powers, that this issue was starting to sort of drop off of out of the news because of news censorship, out of like people's frame of mind in, the upper strata of the working class and the petty bourgeois and the bourgeois. We're all starting to, this wasn't an issue that was penetrating for them. And the students acted in that moment of decline to like re-escalate around a period of time where Israel was escalating their war on the people of Palestine. And I just think watching these student encampments grow and knowing that in those encampments are organized groups of people. They're SDS members, they're Freedom Road members, they're members of the Palestinian Youth Movement or Students for Justice in Palestine. And Black student unions are very, very involved. Anak Bayan, which is the youth organization for like militant Filipino youth. And, it's because of those organizations that the relationships those organizations have, that they're able to sustain these encampments and make these encampments grow. And it's because they are working in unison, they have unity in their actions, and they are sharing lessons that they're learning from encampment to encampment. And that information flows more freely when you are a member of a organization, a militant organization, a revolutionary organization. I think, again, our organization put out a great statement on our website about Columbia lit the fire, spread the Palestine encampments. And, our comrades across the country have taken up that call. I don't see a single FRSO or SDS page of any district or school across the country where they aren't deeply involved in helping students organize the encampment. They are students that are at the encampment. And I think because we have, unity in our ideology, unity in our unconditional support for the Palestinian resistance, because we have an organization that brings us together to make decisions, and then we all carry them out together, we are able to move more effectively. And that is really shown in how the student encampments have been supported and started and nourished by Freedom Road cadre and general members who are doing the work in the student movement to make this moment a possibility.
Let me ask you about that. So you just mentioned about, and I think you did in your speech too, about the unconditional support for the Palestinian movement, the Palestinian national movement. Can you talk a little bit about what that means? And I think that that's different than other organizations that say that they're socialist or revolutionary or whatever. What is I mean, it seems like a pretty broad statement just to say that we unconditionally support the Palestinians.
You know, I think that as people who live in the imperial core, we live in the greatest imperialist nation, not greatest, but in the largest sort of imperialist nation in the country or in the world. We have to, our solidarity with oppressed people, our solidarity with national liberation movements cannot come with strings attached. It's our money that's funding the bombs. It's our money that's buying the bullets. It's our money that's training baby killers. And our support, because we, through our tax dollars, through the benefits we get from society as it is, and nobody really gets benefits, but we in the heart of the empire cannot tell people fighting against American imperialism how they should fight. It's not our place. Our place as people in the US or people in imperialist countries, our job is to support people fighting for liberation, no matter how that looks. And that is true for Native Americans in the US. That's true for Chicanos, for Hawaiians, for Black people. We do not get to define or moralize what their resistance can and should look like.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that's something. We could have a whole episode just right now, but I promised, and we've alluded to that your speech on behalf of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization at the Twin Cities May Day celebration. So we're going to play that clip right now. So here it is.
So much, and thank you to all of our speakers and all of the people who helped put this together, and all of you who are in this movement, making this movement strong and making us united. Militant greetings to all of you, and a very happy May Day. Yeah. I just want us to take a moment to think about the power in this incredible proletarian holiday. We watched that slideshow, and so when we marched on Wednesday, we were marching with millions of people around the world.
Yeah. That's right.
We gather together tonight to acknowledge the contributions of the toilers of the world, and tonight we gather to reflect on the last year and chart our path ahead. My name is David Gilbert Pederson, but most of you know me as DGP. I'm a Filipino immigrant, I'm a co-founder of Minnesota Workers United, I'm an educator, and I'm a member of Freedom Road Socialist Organization. It is such an honor to be in a room full of revolutionaries and leaders of our movement. We've heard this evening from principled, dedicated, and organized leaders about the battles that are being waged here and across the globe. We must remember that we celebrate this holiday in the shadow of giants, like those 5 martyred heroes that Loretta talked to us about that started this great holiday. Leaders like Karl Marx, Vladimir Lenin, Joseph Stalin, and Mao Zedong. And tragically, since last May Day, we stand in the shadow of Sister Shasta Jones, somebody who was really fundamental to me joining this organization. But May Day isn't just about the giants or the struggles of the past. This May Day, we have proven that the revolutionary spirit of Hugo Chavez, of Claudia Jones, of Ghassan Kanafani, of Joma Saison is alive and well in the working class. This evening we gather amidst the implosion of the old world and the inception of a new one. It's a particular honor for me to speak on behalf of Freedom Road Socialist Organization because my membership was a long time coming. And as the veteran comrades might remember, I've been a fellow traveler for about 16 years, since I was about 11 years old, before I joined a couple years ago. So I'm just going to take you back. I was in the 4th grade, 9/11 had just happened, the world was standing with the United States, and what did we decide to do? Start unjustified, unprovoked war.
Yeah, that's right.
As Bush readied America for war, readied the warplanes and the battleships, I readied some cardstock with magic markers and maybe a little glitter, and I held 3-person marches at recess for peace. Eventually, my pops helped me raise my level of struggle and brought me to a rally in downtown. That rally was incredibly, incredibly pivotal for me, and that rally was led by leaders in this room. Since 11-year-old me saw Freedom Road Socialist Organization organizing a mass tide against the war in Afghanistan, I have seen this organization lead time and time again. I've seen Freedom Road cadre lead important upsurges, and in the moments in between, I've seen them organize and educate the people to sustain those moments into and consolidate them into a revolution. Since 11-year-old DGP with the magic markers and the glitter, I have seen this organization lead the resistance to the invasion of Iraq. I was an intern with the Anti-War Committee. I was about 15 years old then. I watched this group lead the massive coalition to march on the RNC in 2008. And a year later, when Miss Rosemary Williams refused to leave her house and give it back to the greedy-ass banks, Freedom Road was there too. When I had just moved back to Minneapolis in 2015, Freedom Road was there to create the Twin Cities Coalition for Justice after a long and brutal occupation of the 4th Precinct. Today, across this country, Freedom Road cadre are leading in the labor movement. They're leading in the struggles for national liberation. They're leading in reproductive and women's rights. They're leading in the fight against privatization. And during the George Floyd uprising, because Freedom Road was there at the refounding of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, we were able to help sustain a global revolution. From LA to Jacksonville, from the Northeast Hub up there on Broadway, all the way to Dallas, our Teamsters comrades led and they put UPS on notice and won huge gains for their members because UPS couldn't take the heat of a strike. Or, as we would say on the South Side, Freedom Road Socialist Organization is neck deep in the struggles with our people.
All right.
Freedom Road is uniting the many to take on the few. We are building power with people's movements and mass organizations, and those movements are winning.
That's right.
We heard about those wins, from Little Earth to the wins from the city council resolutions, to the people of Palestine taking back their country. Our movements are winning. Our movements are winning, and the revolutionary working class is indeed on the move.
Yeah.
The revolution belongs to the people. Every morning, I look at that quote that's taped to my mirror from Ka Oris, a leader of the New People's Army under the guidance of the Communist Party of the Philippines. He was a decades-long leader of the New People's Army and a martyr of the U.S. Duterte war machine. And I believe that to my core. The revolution belongs to the people. The revolution belongs to us. Our liberation is in our hands alone. The conditions for revolution are ripe. Contradictions are sharpening. U.S. imperialism is in free fall. As communists, we must take the reins of this moment. We must use the revolutionary theory of Marxism-Leninism to move the struggle from a lower to a higher level. Marxism-Leninism is the science of how society is organized and how we can organize ourselves to change it. Rizzo studies these lessons by working class revolutionaries who came before us so that we can apply them to the world we are living in today and win now too. I joined Freedom Road because in learning their proud history of struggle, armed with the immortal science of Marxism-Leninism, my level of consciousness was raised. They helped me see that all of our struggles are connected, that we're not just fighting Jacob Fry, Aisha, or Little Earth folks. We're not just fighting Carol Tomei, Teamsters. We're not just fighting killer cops, TCC for J. We're not just fighting Zionism. We are fighting monopoly capitalism and imperialism. Here in Minnesota, Makoche, the land where the water meets the sky. Here in the city that killed Jamar Clark, that killed George Floyd, that killed Amir Locke, we must recognize the pillars that built American capitalism. The genocide and land theft of indigenous peoples and the enslavement and oppression of stolen Africans.
That's right. That's right.
Capitalism is a poisonous tree, and hyper-exploitation of workers and the oppression of nations is its toxic fruit.
That's right.
Capitalism is a system that got us having to choose between the rent and groceries, that have us having to choose between gas and, for me, it's eyeglasses. Capitalism is a system that's designed to prioritize the wants and whims of a few while exploiting, extracting, expropriating, and oppressing the rest of us. Capitalism has our kids seeing less and less while this city becomes a playground for the uber wealthy. Capitalism is a system where Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos reap the immense wealth that we, the toiling masses, create. When we see the vast wealth, the deadly arsenal of the capitalists, it's easy to get blindly rageful, to get burnt out, jumping from upsurge to upsurge, from enemy to enemy. That's where I was in 2019. But Freedom Road also taught me the road out of my rage, the road out of my frustration. Spontaneous upsurges make and shape our history, but only organization, solidarity, and discipline can sustain and grow our movement into a great tide to wipe away exploitation. When you are up against such colossal enemies with seemingly endless resources, it can seem dark. It can seem dim, but do not despair. Hope and joy cometh in the morning. That ain't from no scripture. Our joy and our hope is revolutionary joy. It's revolutionary hope. It's hope that isn't metaphysical or idealist. It's hope based in the material reality. Because the revolution belongs to the people. Because we the people and only the people are the real makers of history. The destruction of empires and the rise of the people has been seen many times in our world's history. And that's because revolutionary leaders use dialectics to apply to the material conditions before them, and they won.
That's right.
That's why when things seemed insurmountable, revolutionary hope gave way to the defeat of apartheid. That's when things seemed insurmountable, revolutionary hope steeled the people of Vietnam to beat both French and U.S. imperialism. And revolutionary hope is what meant that we didn't just sit and cry and mourn when George Floyd was killed. It meant that the people rose up and burned down the terrorist training camp. The revolution belongs to the people. And it is not enough to know what we're fighting against. Freedom Road Socialist Organization is clear about what we're fighting for. We don't want equality. We don't want democratic socialism. We're not looking for compassionate capitalism or intersectional imperialism.
That's right.
We are ready. We want self-determinative power in the hands of the oppressed and exploited masses. We want a system that serves the people. We want socialism. This past year, in particular, the revolution has belonged to the people of Palestine.
Yes, right.
The united Palestinian resistance has shown us a path forward. In tearing down apartheid walls and reclaiming stolen land, the resistance movement demonstrated the importance of a united front against the enemy and unity in our actions. That's revolutionary hope. That's revolutionary joy. And we have that hope and we have that joy here too. That's why the continued Palestinian solidarity movement has proven that we can keep turning out the masses around the world and that the U.S. war machine is in decline. Because of organizations like Students for Justice in Palestine, because of organizations like the Anti-War Committee, because of organizations like American Muslims for Palestine, 15,000 people were able to be mobilized in just days.
Yep. That's right.
And that didn't stop. I'm not going to go through the list because Donia said it already. This coalition has kept the pressure on everywhere it is necessary. So I want to give a particular shout out and a particular praise to both the Free Palestine Coalition and the student movement that occupied the U of M campus. The revolution belongs to the people. It's our job to build the revolution. It's our job as communists to draw connections between our struggles. It's our job as communists to help people make material gains in their conditions. It's our job as communists to raise political consciousness, and it's our job as communists to do what Palestine has done and never stop striking blows against the enemy. The revolution belongs to the people. And what that means in this moment is we have to reject pessimism. We have to reject hateration. We have to reject record shit. That means we have to confront opportunism and adventurism. Principled debates, criticism, self-criticism moves our movement forward, but we must always start from a place of unity.
Yes.
And we must always struggle to get to the place of unity again so we can build our movement up, not tear it down. The revolution belongs to the people. The revolution belongs to me. It belongs to Donia. It belongs to Lena. It belongs to Nick. It belongs to everyone who has spoken here. It belongs to all of you. It belongs to all of us who filled the streets demanding justice for George Floyd. It belongs to all of us who struggled against the war in Iraq and Afghanistan and all of those who struggled against Vietnam and every other imperialist project. The revolution belongs to you. So let's nurture the revolution. Let's raise the level of unity. Let's raise the level of consciousness. Let's raise the level of struggle. This May Day, I invite you to take your place in this revolution. I invite you to deepen your relationship with mass struggle. I invite you to get involved with one of these powerful organizations who spoke here. I invite you to join us as we descend on the conventions of both capitalist killer parties. I think all of you have a flyer on your chair. And finally, I want to invite you to do what I did. I want to invite you to join Freedom Road Socialist Organization because the revolution belongs to the people. I invite you to join us in creating a revolutionary communist party that can take the sledgehammer of revolution to the chains of oppression. United, we can achieve liberation. Together, our future is bright because the revolution belongs to the people.
Wow. So that was DGP in his speech at the Minneapolis St. Paul Freedom Road Socialist Organization Mayday program, and you can see the energy that our guest provided there, and the enthusiasm that he has for the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. So DGP, let me ask you then. So you just told people join Freedom Road, and it was a strong plug for that. Why Freedom Road? Why join Freedom Road Socialist Organization?
Yeah, you heard me in the speech talk about this moment when I was 11 years old. And this was the first time that I encountered what would later become known to me as leaders of Freedom Road. And I talked about the 9/11 had just happened. All eyes were on the United States. The U.S. decides to invade Afghanistan. There is small resistance to that. I think like by the time the war in Iraq was happening, many, many more people were like, we are on the wrong track. But at the time of the invasion of Afghanistan, most people, even like progressives and liberals that were in favor of the invasion, 11-year-old me, I grew up around, raised around like pacifists. And so I was always like peace minded. But, I think 9/11 was very like foundational to that period of time, and sort of being a teenager and growing up in that period of time was incredibly defined by U.S. imperialism and our wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. But so at this march, I was 11 years old. I had, been holding signs at recess, and most people either didn't do anything, a lot of people flicked us off or yelled at us, a few people honked, and so I remember feeling like in a very isolated space in that moment. People were all chomping at the bit and banging on the war drums, and so I felt, some of the people around me or the church my mom went to were, saying we wanted peace or whatever, but I thought it was a very, very small group of people. So my pops takes me down to a rally at the federal building, the federal courthouse in downtown Minneapolis, and there is a giant crowd of people, and chants are being led by these two like young people who are one of whom is a member of Freedom Road and a leader, and one of whom is a mass activist. Sabri Wazwaz, a Palestinian activist here who's been engaged in the Palestinian liberation struggle for decades. So I see them. I'm like, this is a really cool demo. There is a movement, even though it's not the majority. There is a movement that's saying we do not want war. I think as I got older, into my teens, I started to realize that peace wasn't possible without real justice for people, and that unprincipled sort of pacifist peace is how we got to a place of deep oppression, and pushing for unprincipled peace doesn't solve problems. We need to like struggle for like a just peace and a lasting peace for people. And I started to get more involved with the anti-war movement. When I was 15, I interned for the anti-war committee. So I saw Meredith and Jess and people lead in that moment from the anti-war committee, and knew about Freedom Road. And I interned for them from like 15 to 17. Then I did some like bourgeois politics, and realized that like you can't change that system from the inside out at all. And so I got very frustrated, and again got involved with activism, and Freedom Road was there at that moment too. I talked about the occupation of Miss Rosemary Williams' house. She was a elder and a leader in the Black community in Minneapolis, and years before the Occupy Homes movement, like 3 years in 2009, Rosemary was evicted from her home by one of these large banks. And she said, I'm not fucking leaving. And in that occupation, like members and leaders of Freedom Road in the city of Minneapolis were there. They were present. They were helping lead. Then I traveled around doing labor work for a few years. And when I came back, it was 2015. And in 2015, Jamar Clark is killed by the Minneapolis Police Department while handcuffed and while in police custody. And there was a 28-day occupation of the atrium and street in front of the police precinct, a block from where he was killed. And leaders of Freedom Road brought labor members to brought members of organized labor to the Jamar Clark protests. As the encampment outside the precinct was winding down, Freedom Road leaders held a meeting at a church, founded the Twin Cities Coalition for Justice. At that point, it was called the Twin Cities Coalition for Justice for Jamar. And that vehicle and that organization stayed in place through up until now, but there were a few other very high-profile police killings in our city that TCC for J was deeply involved in, that Freedom Road was involved in. And then, so in 2009, I was in a really ugly place. I was really frustrated with sort of union bureaucracy and was also like, just felt like our movements weren't going anywhere, that there was stagnancy. And I'd known Freedom Road comrades in the labor movement for many years, and they asked me to study with them. And I was like, and I'd seen them around for all of these years, this organization. So I said, absolutely. For me, Shireen was like a mentor in the labor movement. So for her to ask me to join, I was like very interested, and I was honored to be asked. We went through the recruitment process, and through that recruitment process, I realized like all of these things that I've been fighting for, like in the lead up to this moment, were all connected to capitalism. And the only solution was revolution. That like the Black liberation struggle, which I had spent a lot of time working in the immigration justice movement, unionism, the anti-war movement, that all of those struggles are struggles that are happening under the like four major contradictions of the world, the contradictions between labor and capital, between imperialism and oppressed nations, between capitalism and socialism, and between the internal intra-imperialist rivalries. And so all of those fights that I was having, whether it was in Occupy Homes, whether it was in the anti-war movement, whether it was in the anti-police crimes movement, like they all had the underlying same enemy, which was the system of imperialism and the system of monopoly capitalism. And so, I think when you are just kind of like going from fight to fight and seeing, all of these moments of upsurge, it's exciting, like when there are moments of upsurge, and it's pretty devastating when there are moments of lull. And for me, Frank Chapman once said, like, we have to be headlights, not taillights. I took the other piece of that for my speech, which is that we have to lead people out of their frustration, not into it. And so when I joined in 2019, I was in a really ugly place. I was like, we can't reform the labor movement. The police are going to keep killing people. Like, union bureaucracy is going to win, and like the unions are all going to endorse Trump, and like the environment's falling apart. Our world is literally on fire. And I think it was in the process of the recruitment process and through doing mass struggle with members of Freedom Road, I realized like if we can come together as movements and as people and fight our real enemy, which is monopoly capitalism and imperialism, then we can win. And that's the only way we can win. And that everything else will just be little reforms that make capitalism a tiny bit more bearable, but don't actually give any more self-determinative power to workers or to oppressed people.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. That's quite a road. One of the things that struck me is a lot of the things you focused on were questions of national oppression. And, whether it be, you talked about Palestine, you talked about national oppression with the murder of Jamar Clark and George Floyd in the Twin Cities. But, the speech you gave was for May Day, which is International Workers' Day. And, certainly oppressed people are overwhelmingly workers. But I wanted to ask you, I want to take a different slant on it a little bit. You've mentioned the trade union movement, and so how does Freedom Road or how does DGP look at the trade union movement, and what are our tasks? I think in your speech you mentioned the Teamsters and the role that Freedom Road comrades played in fighting to get a decent contract there. But as we go forward into 2024 and beyond, what's our task inside the unions, and what do we want the unions to do?
So, I think one of the things that I was most impressed with about Freedom Road and that drew me to Freedom Road the most was our position that revolutionary change in the United States will bring together two powerful currents: the struggles of oppressed nationalities for equality and liberation, and the fight of the multinational working class to end exploitation and oppose all oppression. That sort of, for me, synthesizes like how we need to move in the trade movement a little bit. And so I'll talk about the Strategic Alliance in a bit, but we want to build up the militant minority. And we're not talking about just the people who scream the most at the boss or who want to pick the most fights. We are looking for people who want to build struggle on the shop floor and work with their coworkers to improve their material conditions, while also understanding that we aren't just fighting one bad boss or one bad representative or senator or one bad bill, that we're actually, all of those struggles are happening, particular struggles are happening under the general struggle of labor versus capital. And that we're looking for trade unionists who we call class struggle trade unionists, people who understand the fight against both your own boss in the particular and the system of bosses, capitalism in the general. And I think that's important. And I think because our organization has this line of the Strategic Alliance that sets us apart from other revolutionary groups in the United States, that also means that we need to, in the union spaces, fight against chauvinism, fight against sort of national oppression within our labor movement, which is a thing that I don't think enough unionists are talking about. And it means that in those unions, we have to fight for the leadership of oppressed nationality people. And on the flip side, it means that in our oppressed nationality work, we want to highlight and uplift the voices of working class people of color. And so, that Strategic Alliance guides a lot of our work, but I think this is the place where we separate ourselves from narrow nationalists, and we separate ourselves from sort of protectivists. I don't know. But the we have to build a labor movement that fights for the rights and the needs of oppressed people, and our unions can do that. You had both President Greta Callahan and Vice President Marcia Howard on earlier episodes, and I was involved in that strike. You've also talked to folks from CTU about the wins that they gained in some of
these are the education unions in the Twin Cities and Chicago. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
And like those were struggles that were both about raising wages for working people and about helping tackle issues of national oppression. For instance, one of the big motivators of the teachers' strike, of the educators' strike in Minneapolis 2 years ago, was a living wage for ESPs, education support professionals. They won that, and the teaching force in Minneapolis is 80% white. The ESP force in Minneapolis is 80% Black, Latino, Native, or Asian. And so collectively, the union fighting for the wages of hourly workers was an act of like class solidarity with the lowest paid people. It also had a specific impact raising the wages of oppressed nationality people in the workplace. Also, this contract put out a process under which we could help quell the tide of oppressed nationality educators leaving the profession, and to prioritize having oppressed nationality teachers in oppressed nationality communities. In CTU, the couple strikes, in the strike in 2012 and the strike in 2019, the fights around safe routes to school, counselor ratios, nurse ratios, all of those also were fights not just about teachers' working conditions, but students' learning conditions. And so, I think like when we talk about like class struggle unionism or unionism that is taking on national oppression in their contracts, those are the kind of things we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'd encourage our Fight Back Radio listeners to go back if you haven't heard the interviews with Marcia Howard and Greta Callahan. It's two separate episodes, but the leaders of the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers, yes, I would suggest people go back to those. Unfortunately, we're starting to run out of time here, and so I want to give you the chance. It sounds we could go on for quite a while here. I'm enjoying this, but is there anything that you want to add before we end the interview, DGP?
Yeah, I just want to end by inviting people to take the same actions that I said in my speech. It's very important that you join us at the RNC and the DNC. The RNC, we will have a protest on July 15th in Milwaukee, and the DNC, there will be a protest on the 19th of August in Chicago. I know Minnesota is organizing some buses, and other folks are flying in, but I would just encourage folks, join us at both of these conventions because, Freedom Road as an organization understands that politics is an arena of struggle. It is not the most important by any means. It is not the most effective. It is not the one that we should be spending our time in. But people relate to electoral politics a lot, and a lot of eyes will be on these national conventions. And so this is a time for us to make heard the demands of the people. And we're protesting it both because it doesn't matter. We are making the same demands of both capitalist warmongering parties. Money for food, schools, education, housing, and liberation, not for war. And an end to national oppression, an end to gender exploitation, an end to LGBTQ exploitation, an end to national oppression. And those demands are the same for both parties. And we know that both parties are accountable to the capitalist class and that both parties are complicit in the war crimes that are happening in Gaza and across the world. And so I would invite you to join us at those conventions. If you're not involved in the mass organization in your city, find one that's doing good work. And again, finally, join the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. You can do it online. But yeah, join us. We are building a revolutionary communist party. We are working to build a revolutionary communist party to take on the exploiting class. And as I said in my speech, we're winning. So I invite you to join us in all of these different battles ahead. And I invite you to not just join us in the battles, but join us in the organization that'll help us carry out the battles.
All right. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you.
Okay, David Gilbert Pederson, and what moving speech and a great interview, and I think it explains the importance of organization. He gave his personal accounts of why he was moved to do that, moved to join Freedom Road, and I think think about the things that he said. We're going to put in the show notes all the contact information for the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. We'll also put the link to that episode 2 with Larry Spivak about the history of May Day and the Haymarket Affair. So I encourage you to look at those things and try keep you should labor history, May Day history, people's history. Read up, study up on that, and hopefully this sparked a little bit of that too. But also, look a little deeper. If you like, David, encourages us to get involved in any kind of organization for justice, whether it's your labor union, a peace organization, environmental group, whatever it is. These are important things. If we're going to have change, it's going to come from people power, not from hoping that the rich do the right thing. So, anyways, before we sign off, I always give at the end a shout out to the production team, but I've been neglecting. I wanted to give a shout out also to our music. It comes from Andy Koch, who's been doing it for whatever it is. We've had the same music all the time, and I listen to some of these other podcasts, and they shout out the music, and I don't do that, and so I apologize, Andy. And so here's a special May Day shout out to Andy Koch, who does the Fight Back theme song at the beginning and at the end. But also I want to shout out our production team, which is Dodd McColgan, Natalie Pranis, Vince Olson, and Shane Tremley. And I'm Richard Berg for the entire Fight Back radio team, saying until next time, all power to the people.